Another crazy day in the WCC tournament on Saturday. Welcome all into another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Pepperdine continues to roll on. They will take on Santa Clara on Sunday. Washington State rolls over LMU, and they will take on USF. Those are the two matchups for the quarterfinals of the WCC tournament. We'll get into the recaps of Pepperdine's win and Washington State's win. We'll also start to preview the matchups on Sunday as well. But we're also starting to get into the games that have the March implications. The games that are the Quad 1, Quad 2 qualifiers. We know USF and Santa Clara are very much on the outside looking in when it comes to the NCAA tournament or an at-large bid. But both of these teams, at the very least, have an outside shot of getting in. Santa Clara is now probably the best set up to do so based on the fact that they are healthy. And they will also now, they have Pepperdine rather than Oregon State in this first round, in this first matchup for them on Sunday. They still would have to go through St. Mary's, then they would still have to go through either Washington State, USF, or Gonzaga, likely Gonzaga in my mind, to win the whole thing. But Santa Clara does hold that shot. Now for USF, probably unlikely at this stage based on the news about Marcus Williams. If you have not heard, USF did put out a statement stating that Marcus Williams will be held out of competition while they are investigating an NCAA eligibility concern, and that there is not a whole lot of information other than that at this stage. So you can check the USF website for more information on that in the full statement. There's also the concern about the health and availability of Ryan Beasley. He went down during the Gonzaga game the other night with an injury, and who knows if we're going to see him in this matchup on Sunday. My guess, based on what we have seen to this point, is no. He did miss the WCC tournament or parts of the WCC tournament last year as well. So this is Ryan Beasley has had some injury problems throughout the course of his career. He missed parts of earlier this season with an injury as well. So this is very concerning for USF. We'll get into that full picture of that. But as far as them winning the WCC tournament, it was going to be a challenge no matter what. Getting through Washington State, getting through Gonzaga, who had beaten them twice, and then having to get through either Santa Clara or St. Mary's was going to be an uphill battle at full strength. And now that they know they likely will not have either or two of their top three guards, this becomes that much greater of a challenge, and the likelihood of them being able to pull off 3 wins in Vegas becomes that much smaller. Now, for Gonzaga, St. Mary's, these two are paying attention to what happens in these games on Sunday because it does matter for the resume, because Washington State doesn't carry the resume builder that USF does. Obviously, Pepperdine doesn't carry the resume builder that Santa Clara does. And both of these teams are still trying to build the seeding resume. Both, from most accounts, are safely in. St. Mary's is safely in. Gonzaga, it's seemingly solidified its spot of being in. Now it's really about what the seed line is going to look like. And based off of what we have seen, at least from a few brackets, CBS has Gonzaga as a 9, ESPN has them as an 8, Field of 68 also has them as an 8. St. Mary's, CBS has them as an 8 seed, which seems wildly low. ESPN has them as a 5, and Field of 68 has them as a 5. What can both of these teams do to help the cause? Obviously, winning the whole thing would be immensely helpful. Win the next 2 games for Gonzaga, win the next 2 games for St. Mary's helps. But it's who does matter. For St. Mary's, it would matter that it's Pepperdine instead of Santa Clara. Much rather for the resume have it be Santa Clara and then have it be Gonzaga. For Gonzaga, you'd much rather have it be USF and then have it be St. Mary's. Even if USF is now not the same team as they were even a week ago, the resume is still the resume. The metrics are still the metrics. And that USF squad is still a quad 2 game on a neutral site. So that is still a big boost for the resume for Gonzaga. Santa Clara also being a quad 2, possibly a quad 1 based on what they do against Pepperdine, is also wildly beneficial to St. Mary's as they go into this matchup, as they think about who they're going to face in the semifinals. So while I know it's fun, and I personally, just as a fan, as a sports fan, I almost want to say I want to see Pepperdine win that game. It would be a great story to see Washington State make a run, or even USF continue to do what they've done without the help of a Marcus Williams and a Ryan Beasley. But I also know for the resumes of St. Mary's, it is better that it's Santa Clara. For the resume of Gonzaga, it is better if it's USF. That is just the reality of the metrics and what these two teams are still looking to build before we get to Selection Sunday, which is only a week away. So the countdown is on. Selection Sunday is only 7 days away. We are this close to knowing who is going where for the NCAA tournament. And we have 6 teams left in the WCC who all could be the auto bid for the conference. And if the auto bid is not St. Mary's and it's not Gonzaga, we will have a bid stealer coming from the WCC. And now I'm all for the bid stealer, and that would be great to see a third. If it's Santa Clara, if it's Washington State, if it's USF, if it's Pepperdine, St. Mary's and Gonzaga are safe. But for their seasons, for their resume, for what they want seeding wise, they're looking to sweep this whole thing. They're looking to make sure they get the next 2 wins, and Santa Clara and USF do help them out more than Pepperdine and Washington State. All right, so let's get into the recaps from Saturday. All right, we're going to start with the team that continues to roll in the WCC tournament, and that is the Pepperdine Waves. So they took on Oregon State on Saturday, and this game was a back and forth contest, and Pepperdine started to separate itself in the second. And I will use Coach Ed Schilling's words. They are riding the glass surfboard to the quarterfinals against Santa Clara as they won 77-73. Really competitive first half between these two, high scoring. Neither team was able to separate. Oregon State led at the break 40-38, but then it was Pepperdine in the second half that started to inch further and further away. They ended up by 11 before a flagrant 2 by Jackson Olvera with 4:50 left kind of switched the momentum a bit in this contest. Oregon State went on an 8-0 run that cut it back to 3. But some clutch free throws by Bobakar Coulibaly, some late free throws from Mo Odom held the Beavers off. The Waves were able to get the win. This was a great, obviously, game for Pepperdine one more time. This is a team that won 4 conference games all season long, and they have 2 here in Las Vegas as they were able to close out Washington State. So they have the win over Portland and now a win over Washington State. This one, you had some great performances. This time it was Stefan Todorovic who was the leader for Pepperdine. He had 34 in this contest, 10 and 18 from the field, 5 of 9 from 3. Talked about how yesterday he was 5 for 15 from the field, and you knew that he was going to have one of those bounce back games, and he had it in a career night way, surpassing his previous career high of 33. Todorovic was great in this one. Mo Odom one more time was also critical in this one. He did miss. He made a couple free throws at the very end, but he also missed a couple one-and-ones that would have helped Pepperdine stretch this out a little bit more. But he had 17 points, 10 more assists in this one. He continues to have a great tournament. I think there's a very good shot we're going to see him end up in that in that all-tournament team just based off the last two nights. The 31 last night, the 17-10 tonight. He's been great. Pepperdine shot 50% from the field. They shot 40% from three. They stuck with Oregon State on the rebounding front. That was a key that I had. They had to keep it close. They were only -2 in that category. Oregon State, it really was that second half for this team that really kind of doomed them. They shot 29% in the second half. Free throws were really the only thing that kind of kept them alive. They were 16 for 20 in the second period, but 1 for 11 from three. They limited Michael Rataj, who was also hampered with an ankle injury, 1 point, 0 for 4 from the field. DeMarco Minor was the one big bright spot for Oregon State. He had 22 points, 8 rebounds. The 22 is his second highest total of the season, second highest to the 23 he had against Utah Tech very early on in the season. He had some 2 huge offensive rebounds and a putback to keep Oregon State in this contest. He was almost trying to will the Beavers back to a victory in this one. That one rebound, there were a couple really tough rebounds there at the end, but one just reminded me so much of a rugby player. And I'm like, this is a guy, if he wants it, could very well be a rugby player at some level as well. But this Pepperdine squad continues to impress throughout the tournament. They were swept by Portland. They won here. They were swept by Oregon State. They won again. They are still alive. They're still playing well. They have scored 86 and 77 in the 2 games so far, and they will take on Santa Clara on Sunday. And this Santa Clara team, as we know, is one of the best offensive teams in the conference. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. And these two teams met once in the regular season, but way back on December 28th at Santa Clara, and the Broncos won that 90-81. Pepperdine did a lot of the little things well in that game. They won the points in the paint battle. They won points off turnovers. They won fast break points. They shot it fairly well. The one thing that Santa Clara did better than Pepperdine in this one was they made 15 threes, which sounds like Santa Clara. When they're on, they are one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. They had 23 just the other week against Washington State. They had 18 at Gonzaga. That performance, a 3-point repertoire, is something they are capable of bringing on the road. It's something we have seen in neutral sites as well. This Santa Clara team is also coming off with a lot of rest, and honestly, it's probably a team that has needed some rest. They've been banged up. Tilly has missed time. Ball has missed time. Stewart probably has needed a break as well. A lot of that team, even though they're deep, has had a little bit of a rough go with it on a physicality side, and having the extra couple days off has probably helped this team. Even though, again, with thinking of shooting rhythms and everything else, it's always nice to have a little bit more of a rhythm going into a contest like this, but I don't think it would take too long for Santa Clara to find that back again. That said, I mean, this Pepperdine team is playing well. They have shown that they are capable of closing games out. They have shown that they are capable of winning tough games. They have shot it well. They have rebounded well. They have taken care of the basketball. They've done all the things you want to do in this sort of setting. But can they do it 3 days in a row? I think is the biggest question facing the Waves going into this one. A lot of momentum. The adrenaline is going to be pumping. But now on day 3 for the Waves and day 1 for Santa Clara, how much is left in the tank against this squad, against Adama Ball, Carlos Stewart, Elijah Mahi, the backcourt of this Santa Clara team, where I think is going to be a bit of the equalizer. We talked a bit about how in the Oregon State game, that Pepperdine needed to play. They needed to find a way to slow down the post presence of the Beavers, because their advantage, the Waves' advantage, was probably in the guard spots, and we saw that tonight with Todorovic and Odom playing very, very well one more time. That will not be the case against Santa Clara. Santa Clara is going to be able to bring that at the guard spot in the backcourt. They're also going to be able to bring that size inside. The two things that Santa Clara may not do as well is that they don't play that great a defense, and they can be at times prone to on the rebounding front. This is an area where maybe Pepperdine can actually play a little bit of a grittier game. We saw them play that tonight inside with Oregon State and do well and stay close to them. And I think that's what Pepperdine is going to have to do against Santa Clara to hang around in this one. And more than anything, as talked about Santa Clara's ability to shoot the three, it's make it difficult for the Broncos on the three-point line. Force them to do something else, if at all possible. Chase them off the three-point line, because Santa Clara is going to do that well if you leave them open enough. And we know it's 1 through 5 for Santa Clara. It's Johnny O'Neal, it's Christoph Tilley, it's Carlos Stewart, it's Mahi, it's Ball, it's Napper. Like, even he has started to turn his three-point shot around, even though he doesn't have a huge volume of them. We're starting to see him also shoot it well from distance. I mean, Pepperdine scored 81 in the first matchup, but this really feels like we might be hitting the end of the road for Pepperdine. Santa Clara has been sitting there. They've been one of the best teams in the conference all year long. We know what they're capable of. Obviously, beating Gonzaga, beating Oregon State, beating USF, sweeping Washington State. This is a Santa Clara team that does have eyes on winning the WCC tournament. They are more than capable of winning the whole thing. And while we have seen Santa Clara have pitfalls in the past against teams like a Pepperdine, it didn't happen in conference play this year. They didn't lose to a San Diego like they did a year ago. They didn't lose to a Pepperdine. They didn't lose to a Portland. They didn't lose to any of that bottom tier of the WCC this season. And this is a Santa Clara squad that I think is going to handle their business. Unlike Oregon State, who could not find a way to win this one, I don't think Santa Clara is going to have that problem. Santa Clara, last time out, just smoked Pacific. They went up to Washington State and crushed the Cougars up there. They did lose to Gonzaga at home, but Gonzaga might be playing their best basketball of the season right now. So looking at this matchup, Santa Clara to me is going to be the pick. I think this is going to be a big night for Adama Ball. I think we're going to see also a big night out of Elijah Mahi. I think his playmaking ability is going to be really beneficial throughout the course of the tournament, and we will get the first sight of that on Sunday night. And also, this is the first of the Sunday games back in the WCC tournament. We had that Sunday day off for a decade plus when BYU was part of the conference. Now this is a game day once again. So there will be no more off days in between the quarterfinals and the semis. We're going to have continuous days of basketball, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So Santa Clara, they're going to have their first game, and they better be ready. If they can, because remember, whoever wins this game does get St. Mary's on Monday night, and no matter who it is, that is going to be a tough matchup for either the Broncos or Pepperdine. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the nightcap of WCC Sunday, and that is going to be what was LMU and Washington State, as Washington State won 94-77. This was a game the Cougs just jumped on LMU from the start. They had a 22-8 lead at the 12-minute mark. They only had one turnover in those first 8 minutes. Ethan Price who finished with 22, had 20 in the first half. Washington State was shooting 51%, 25-17 rebounding margin. They only had 2 turnovers in that first half, 22-12 advantage in the paint. Everything went right for Washington State, yet it felt like it was a lot bigger of a lead than it actually was. They had an 8-point lead at the half. MJ Amy had 11. He was really the kind of the one guy keeping them in it in the first period. He ended up finishing with 16 for the night off the bench. But in the second half, it was just more of the same from Washington State. They continued to be very efficient on the offensive end. They frustrated LMU on the glass. They really, every time it seemed like LMU was going to go on a run, LMU found a way to almost get in their own way. Multiple times in the second half, they started to put a run together, and then there would be an unforced turnover. There'd be a fast break to kill the momentum. Washington State did a really good job of not letting LMU have extended periods of offensive success. And this looked like the most complete game we have seen Washington State play in a long, long time. Honestly, this looked like early season Washington State in this contest, the one that we all thought actually had an outside shot of an at-large bid. That's the team that showed up in their first night in Vegas. Nate Calmes had 22, his 10th game of 20-plus points. Lawan Watts had 12 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists. Rahard Favors off the bench, 16 points. He was 4 for 5 from 3. He continues to shoot it really well the last couple of weeks. And I mentioned the turnovers. 11 turnovers tonight against LMU, which was the 5th lowest total of the season for Washington State, which obviously is a great sign for them. And this comes off a game against Pepperdine earlier or last weekend where they only had 9. They've only had 20 total turnovers the last 2 games. And for a team that has turned it over 20 plus times in a single game, the fact that they've had that over a 2-game period is a very good sign that this might be a little bit of a turning point, because we've seen they can run offense against anybody, that they are one of the best offensive teams in the country. What has been their Achilles heel has just been their own turnovers. And the last 2 nights out, what we have seen from Washington State is that they are starting to take better care of the basketball. And very quickly, you're seeing the results. That when they don't beat themselves, they're a very, very good team. So we saw that on Saturday. Now the challenge is going to be if they can keep it up going into Sunday and do it against USF, which this USF team is not the USF team we saw even just a few days ago. The team has changed quite a bit, and it's because of really one change, and that being the absence of Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams, USF did put out a statement about his availability going into the tournament. Obviously, this doesn't necessarily mean that he will not play as of yet. However, the statement that came out, this was on Friday night, so I'll reread the release from USF. Quote, the University of San Francisco has received information concerning men's basketball student athlete Marcus Williams that indicates he has been involved in an NCAA rule violation impacting his eligibility. The university continues to work on obtaining additional information related to this issue, but at this time will withhold him from competition. The University of San Francisco is committed to upholding all NCAA rules and ensuring that each student athlete representing the institution in competition meets all eligibility requirements. This is the only statement the university will make concerning this matter. With this news, this does likely mean Marcus Williams will not be playing on Sunday. USF's second best scorer, second best player will not be available. He has played every game for USF since he arrived 3 years ago, which is 99 games. He has played the last 99 games for the Dons. this year, averaging 15 points per game, 4.3 assists. He's shooting 41% from three, 1,209 career points. We're looking at a guy who obviously has been a key cog in what the Dons have been able to do the last few years, and he will not be a part of what we see on Sunday, which is in and of itself a huge blow right away. This is a team that's already missing Guido Newberry since December. So you lost your best front court player long ago. You now lost your best point guard in this scenario. You also are down your other point guard in not it is not confirmed yet, but it did not look good the other night. The injury that Ryan Beasley suffered, it looked like it was a pretty bad ankle turn. And while it is still be determined if he is available or not, if he is also not available, the combination of not having Marcus Williams and Ryan Beasley means that this team is going to be wildly shorthanded going into their matchup against Washington State. And this isn't a team that has a huge amount of depth at the guard spot. So you start to look at, well, who steps in if these two are unavailable? Robbie Beasley obviously will get some more minutes in that contest. He'll obviously be able to step in. But I'm also you may see a bit more of Jason Rivera-Torres as well. I think he'll get a few more minutes. But I'm also thinking with the lack of options because I'm thinking about offense on this front. Robbie Beasley doesn't give you a ton on the offensive end. And if he were to be entered into that starting lineup, I don't know where my offense is going to come from on a consistent basis outside of Malik Thomas. And if I'm Washington State, I'm going to be paying extra attention to Malik Thomas and making sure that somebody else beats me and not Thomas, because we know that he is one of the more explosive scorers in the league. He could go for 30 on any night. And if I'm looking around that roster, I want to force someone else to try to do it because he's the only one I know for sure that can. I want to make sure that it's Carlton Lingard or Barry Wang or Tyrone Riley. I've got to make somebody else beat me if I'm Washington State. And in a way to try to quell that or try to counter Washington State in some way, I'm almost thinking that if you're USF, maybe going big is the way to go. Maybe try to just out physical Washington State. They are coming off of a game against an LMU squad, even though LMU looked kind of weathered, battered, or whatnot. That is still a physical matchup, and we have seen the two games between Washington State and USF be physical contests. And this almost screams the use of Venabosi, that he should be maybe inserted into that starting lineup, and you go big. Even toying with some starting lineups, I was looking at what if you went Thomas, Riley up the two, Abosi, Wang, Lingard. This way you have a much larger lineup to try to match what Washington State will try to do, because you do still need somebody to try to check Nate Calmes on the perimeter, whether that's Thomas. I mean, that would have been Marcus Williams in that scenario, but I don't know, maybe you go to Tyrone Riley and see if he can be the one maybe doing a little bit of the old school Scottie Pippen sort of offense, or Andre Iguodala of more recent years, of putting the longer defender on the opponent's point guard. Try to do something, mix it up, because USF is going to be I think they're in trouble going into Sunday. This really, the two losses that they are likely to have going into that game might be too much to overcome, might just be too much for them to be able to handle. Because it almost feels like I need Malik Thomas to score 40 in this game to win. Washington State is going to score. That's not really a question. It's whether or not you can slow them down and whether or not you can take advantage of the mistakes that they might make. And how do you survive not having them both. It feels like you have to just be efficient. That is the best way to try to do it. You have to slow Washington State down as best you can. You have to limit your turnovers. You have to rebound well. You have to limit second chance points. You have to shoot it well. USF, when they shoot from the three well, obviously is a better team than when they don't, which is maybe just simple math on that front. But they rely so heavily on the three-point shot that if they can get going early and get some other guys that we don't see much from going early, if Tyrell Riley can get into a rhythm early, if Robbie Beasley can get into a rhythm early, if Carlton Lingard can get into a rhythm early from distance, that changes the equation for USF, and they might be able to pull this out. But with the changes, with the potential of who will be missing from this game, this feels like a Washington State game. This feels like one that they are going to be able to take. And this also feels like a game like we saw Ethan Price take to the WCC tournament really well in game one. I would expect that to stay the same. We saw Nate Calmese have a great game in game one. The one guy I'm almost looking at to have the scoring breakout is Lawan Watts. He's had continued complete games over the course of the season. He had a near triple-double again tonight. And I would expect to see something similar from him as well. But I'm also thinking of like this might be the game where he goes for 20. This could be the game where he has a little bit more of the breakout on the offensive end. But this Washington State squad is starting to feel actually a little bit deeper with the play of Thrasherson over the last month or so. Favors is starting to play a little bit better. Andy Okafor is giving them really good minutes as well. A Washington State team that looked a little on the thin side a month ago, a Washington State team that looked like it wasn't taking care of the basketball a month, even a couple weeks ago, seems to have solved at least some of those problems in the short term. And if they can continue that solid play of what we've seen over the last week or so, they're going to give themselves obviously a very good chance of beating USF and then moving on to play Gonzaga in the semis. Again, that's who the winner of this game will be seeing is Gonzaga. And I mean, now, neither of these teams have played the Zags well in their game. So both of them are in for a tough matchup, regardless of who wins and sees Gonzaga on Monday. But going into this one, it really does feel like Washington State is in the driver's seat to be able to take this one. USF is going to have to do a lot of things well and going to have Washington State do some things not well to be able to pull this one out. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on social media at PostByZach, at unofficial WCC pod. The next episode will be coming from Las Vegas as we get set for the semifinals of the WCC tournament. St. Mary's and Gonzaga await the winners of the two games tonight, Washington State and USF, and Santa Clara and Pepperdine. All right, I'll do it. Thanks for listening, everybody, and I will catch you later.